Howdy folks, Monty here, and in this video we're going to be going over tanking strategies for Halls of Valor. Halls of Valor is a 5-boss mythic and is one of the more easier ones in Mythic Plus, provided you kind of know what you're doing. The first boss in here is Heimdall. Like most bosses, he's going to need to be faced away from the raid as he deals a cleave damage with his bloodletting sweep. He also has Dancing Blade, which is going to throw a sword on the ground that's going to spin in place, deal damage to anybody standing in it, so make sure you're not standing in it. The biggest thing about Heimdall is the static field ability. You're going to need to make sure that you're situationally aware of where the Storm Drakes are. How this works is he calls a Storm Drake. The Storm Drake will fly up, you'll see it flying up, and then it will deal lightning damage across 1/3 of the battlefield. It's going to strafe across. Make sure you're not standing in its path, and then once it does that, that static field is going to summon ball lightning that's going to travel towards the group. Make sure you're not standing in the path of ball lightning. Let it go past you without hitting you, and you'll be fine. In Mythic, this happens multiple times, so once that first static field comes and goes, move into where that first static field was so you're not hit by the follow-up. Next up is Hirja. Hirja is going to be alternating between Holy and Shadow forms. If you keep her in the middle of the room, she's going to be empowered by both, because what happens during this fight is the mini-bosses that you killed immediately prior to her, their spirits are going to be channeling. One of them will be channeling Holy, the other one will be channeling Shadow. Into Hirja, you'll see the channel going towards her, and she's going to deal increased damage from that class of ability the more stacks she gets. If you're far enough away from one, you're only going to get the channel for one. So what you want to do is pull her on one side of the room or the other, tank her there until she does her big ability, which for Holy will be Sanctify, where you're going to want to charge the Holy Tornadoes. For Shadow, it's going to be Eye of the Storm, where you're going to want to stand in the Void Bubble. Immediately after the ability, she's going to cast Shield of Light, which is going to deal damage to you. You're going to want to use your active mitigation to mitigate that and knock you back. Position yourself such that you'll be knocked back to the other side. She'll follow you, and then you'll be, doing the next ability. So if you started on the light side, after the Sanctify is done, after you've dodged all the Holy Tornadoes, hit your active mitigation. Shield of Light will knock you over to the Void side. You can pull her over there to where she's not getting any holy ticks, and work with her until Eye of the Storm. I don't recommend doing it in that order. It's much easier to do it Eye of the Storm, because I think that's a much easier mechanic to deal with. Next up is Fenrir. Fenrir is apparently the quote-unquote deadliest boss in the game, according to Blizzard, as he's causing the most player deaths. I don't see it. He's actually pretty straightforward. The first thing you're going to do is find him, and in the first spot you find him in, you're going to have to DPS him down to, I believe it's 70%, at which point he will retreat and drop combat and go back to his cave. That first 30% when you're finding him is more or less a tank and spank, so there's not really anything to worry about there. Once he's back to his cave, there is going to be a little bit more to deal with. The first thing is Ravenous Leap. He's going to charge a random party member and deal damage to them and everyone around them. You want to make sure that you're kind of standing away so that you're not taking excessive damage. Hopefully your party members, when they're targeted by Ravenous Leap, are moving away from the raid. That way that's not being tossed around. The next thing is Claw Frenzy, which you do need to stack with your party members to split the damage. It's going to do large AoE damage to all enemies within 12 yards. You want to stack that up because it's going to split that damage across all enemies. So make sure you're stacking up for Claw Frenzy. That way you're not having excessive damage on your party, and really that's about it. Next up is God King Scoville. Scovil's big mechanic is related to the Aegis of Ragnarok. You'll want to pick that up at the start of the fight, and whenever he starts to cast Ragnarok, which is a giant AoE, hit the Aegis, so a shield will appear around you and prevent anybody from who's standing in the shield, at least, from taking damage from Ragnarok. The other big thing is Savage Blade. He's going to deal heavy damage when he casts that. You want to use your active mitigation there. Because it's kind of like the mechanics that you see on the last boss in Altherion's Lair. This is going to deal more damage to you if you have not recently used your active mitigation, such as Death Strike or Shield of the Righteous, or whatever you've got as an active mitigation ability. The last boss is Odin, and Odin can be a bear sometimes, especially if you're a Death Knight and don't have a lot of mobility. Odin is going to do a few things. He's going to throw spears that are going to land and shoot glowing fragments from several directions. Those glowing fragments, if you're standing in them, are going to deal damage and, more importantly, stun you. He's also going to suck the entire raid into him and then start casting Radiant Tempest. When this happens, you're going to want to run out. If you're inside that circle after Radiant Tempest is done, it's going to deal a huge, huge amount of damage to you. The next big thing is Runic Brand. At some point, he's going to put a brand on each player. It's going to have a colored rune on you that's going to correspond to a rune in the tanking area, in the area that you're fighting him. If you run to that rune in enough time, you'll lose the debuff, you'll turn into a Valkyr and do increased damage, which is when you want to pop Heroism. If you don't get there in time, a Valkyr will come and grab you and take you up into the stands, which is akin to death on this fight. You'll be out of the fight, and it's not going to be a good deal. Like I said, this is where classes with low mobility, like Death Knights, can really have a problem, because while this is happening, the glowing fragments from the spear light are all around. If you get hit by those, if you don't have a stun break, or if you're far enough away from your rune, you're going to have problems. So just make sure that you're prepared for this. Make sure you're trying to position yourself as much as you can in the center of the room, so that when Runic Brand happens, you can move to that rune quickly. Odin does summon an ad. It's not recommended to tank the ad. Your DPS is going to want to stun and otherwise control the ad, but make sure you're understanding where the ad is, so that if he comes around you, you can throw out that stun to help them out. You can throw out the cleave damage, whatever you can do to help make their jobs a little bit easier. Finally, the only other thing to watch for with Odin is he's going to shatter spears at some point, which all the spears of light that he's thrown on the ground are going to explode at once and send more glowing fragments out. And it's, again, just one of those things where you don't want to stand in the ouch. You also want to make sure that you're tanking Odin kind of away from those, so that the DPS isn't having to dodge a ton of fragments at once. And really, that's the instance. Halls of Valor, it's a fairly long one, but ultimately a fairly easy one. Hope you guys enjoy this. If this was helpful, hit me with a like, hit me with a subscribe, and give me some comments. Let me know how you're doing in Halls of Valor. Let me know if you have any tips and tricks that you use in this instance. And thank you again so much for watching.